Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, If a person sins and commits a trespass against the Lord by lying to his neighbor about what was delivered to him for safekeeping, or about a pledge, or about a robbery, or if he is extorted from his neighbor, or if he has found what was lost and lies concerning it and swears falsely, in any one of these things that a man may do in which he sins, then it shall be, because he has sinned and is guilty, that he shall restore what he has stolen, or the thing which he has extorted, or what was delivered to him for safekeeping, or the lost thing which he has found, or all that about which he has sworn falsely. He shall restore its full value, add 1/5 more to it, and give it to whomever it belongs on the day of his trespass offering. And he shall bring his trespass offering to the Lord, a ram without blemish from the flock, with your valuation as a trespass offering to the priest. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven for any of these things that he may have done in which he trespasses. So here we see somebody who is doing something intentionally. In the last chapter we were reading a lot about sin offerings being offered up to the Lord by people who were doing things unintentionally. Now we see people who are mistreating their neighbors intentionally, people who are lying, people who are extorting, people who are stealing, people who are finding things and keeping them even though they know their neighbor is looking for them and asking about them. And that if he wants to be forgiven this trespass against his neighbor, that he then also needs to make restitution to the neighbor before he even brings his trespass offering before the Lord, or else it will not be accepted. That is what the Lord is getting at. If he wants to be forgiven, then he needs to make restitution to his neighbor. And we see this in other places throughout the Bible, even the New Testament, where the Lord is saying, you need to, if you're bringing an offering to the temple to be sacrificed, and there's something between an anonymity between you and your neighbor, you and your brother, you need to make it right with him first before you bring the offering to me. Because the offering will not be accepted in that case. You need to go forth and you need to make it right with your neighbor first. Your neighbor needs to be the one. Because if you're not loving your neighbor as yourself, then you are not following the commandments the Lord had laid out for you. Because that is 6 of the commandments are about treating your neighbor as yourself. In that case, you are not acting in the way the Lord wants you to act, so he's not going to accept your sacrifice. Even going into the New Testament version of the church, you have Paul telling us that when we go to take the Lord's Supper, when we go into communion, we are to be right with our brothers first. We are to have no anonymity between the brethren in our hearts, because if we do, we need to make that right first before going and supping with the Lord, which in Paul's day was not a cracker, was not a wafer. It was not what we view as now. It was an actual meal, which is why he kind of attacks the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians about being greedy and having some people going there and stuffing their faces while others are sitting there starving. You have these people with means going in that Corinthian church and glutting themselves at the Lord's Supper while other people have nothing to eat, so you're not showing love to your brother. Now, obviously, if he had been talking about some unleavened bread and a little mouthful of wine, you're not glutting yourself on that. The way that we do the Lord's Supper now and the way it was done in the early church are two completely different things. There it was a meal, as was the Last Supper. It was an actual full-on meal. But picking up in verse 8, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the law of the burnt offering. The burnt offering shall be on the hearth upon the altar all night until morning. And the fire of the altar shall be kept burning on it. And the priest shall put on his linen garment, and his linen trousers he shall put on his body, and take up the ashes of the burnt offering which the fire is consumed on the altar, and he shall put them beside the altar. Then he shall take off his garments, put on other garments, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. So we saw this when we were talking about the sin offering, how the priest was to carry it out to the clean place where they put the ashes. Well, this is where he's laying out how you are to do that. The burnt offerings were to be going all night until morning. It was still to just continue burning. When all the ashes were gone, and you got up in the morning, you got up, you took these ashes out, and you dumped them out. This is one of the first things you did. You took off your garments, you went out, and you did this as a way to keep the tabernacle orderly and clean. So you put these out in a clean place, not a dirty place, a clean place. And this was your rule for keeping the altar clear of ashes and keeping the tabernacle clean per the ordinances of God. And the fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it, and it shall not be put out. And the priest shall burn wood on it every morning, and lay burnt offering in order on it. And he shall burn it on it the fat of the peace offering. The fire shall always be burning on the altar. It shall never go out. So they were to keep this fire burning all the time. It was never to stop burning. They were to continue burning it throughout their generations as a way to show that the Lord was there, the Lord was in their presence, and the Lord was always accepting of their offerings. This is the law of the grain offering. The sons of Aaron shall offer it on the altar before the Lord. He shall take from it his handful of the fine flour of the grain offering with its oil and all its frankincense, which is on the grain offering, and shall burn it on the altar for a sweet aroma as a memorial to the Lord. And the remainder of it Aaron and his sons shall eat. With unleavened bread it shall be eaten in a holy place. In the court of the tabernacle of meeting they shall eat it. It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it as their portion of my offerings made by fire. It is most holy, like the sin offering and the trespass offering. All the males among the children of Aaron may eat it. It shall be a statute in your generations concerning the offerings made by fire to the Lord. Everyone who touches them must be holy. So there's a certain place you're going to have to eat this. See that they're not to leave it left over, that they're to eat it in a certain time frame, and anyone who does go to touch it must be set apart for the Lord. So you are not to have just anyone coming up and eating this. And they are not to eat it if they have not re-washed in that laver, that they have not reconsecrated themselves before the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this is the offering of Aaron and his sons, which they shall offer to the Lord, beginning on the day when he is anointed. 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour is a daily grain offering, half of it in the morning and half of it at night. It shall be made in a pan with oil. When it is mixed, you shall bring it in. The baked pieces of the grain offering you shall offer for a sweet aroma to the Lord. The priest from among his sons who is anointed in his place shall offer it. It is a statute forever to the Lord. It shall be wholly burned. For every grain offering for the priest shall be wholly burned. It shall not be eaten. So here is the grain offering that the priests themselves will have to make every single day. So from that flour of the peace offering, from the grain offering that they are keeping from the rest of the congregation, they are now going to have to take a portion of that and burn it completely every morning and every evening before the Lord, as a way of showing their dedication to the Lord. This is the offering they have to make in ministering to the Lord. Also the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is killed, the sin offering shall be killed before the Lord. It is most holy. The priest who offers it for sin shall eat it. In a holy place it shall be eaten. In the court of the tabernacle of meeting, everyone who touches its flesh must be holy. When its blood is sprinkled on any garment, you shall wash that on which it was sprinkled in a holy place. But the earthen vessel in which it is boiled shall be broken. If it is boiled in a bronze pot, it shall be both scoured and rinsed in water. All the males among the priests may eat it. It is most holy, but no sin offering from which any of the blood is brought into the tabernacle of meeting to make atonement in a holy place shall be eaten. It shall be burned in the fire. So some of the sin offering, the priests are allowed to keep that to eat for their daily allotment of meat. But they are not to eat meat. They are not to eat blood of any kind. If there's any left over, it needs to be burnt. It needs to be destroyed. Because the blood is a symbol of life, and you are not to eat the blood. So, moving on to chapter 7. Likewise, this is the law of the trespass offering. It is most holy. In the place where they kill the burnt offering, they shall kill the trespass offering, and its blood he shall sprinkle all around the altar, and he shall offer from all its fat, the fat tail and the fat that covers the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys he shall remove, and the priest shall burn them on the altar as an offering made by fire to the Lord. It is a trespass offering. Every male among the priests may eat it. It shall be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy. The trespass offering is like the sin offering. There is one law for them both. The priest who makes atonement with it shall have it. And the priest who offers anyone's burnt offering, that priest shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering which he has offered. So also every grain offering that is baked in the oven, and all that is prepared in the covered pan or in a pan shall be the priest who offers it. Every grain offering, whether mixed with oil or dry, shall belong to all the sons of Aaron, to one as much as another. So he's breaking out the laws of what is going to be acceptable, who gets what part of the offering they get to keep themselves. So the one actually performing the sacrifice, the one performing the atonement, is going to keep the meat for themselves. Anyone who eats it has to be holy. That is, they have to be set apart. They have to be ritually clean. They need to be in a place where only they are eating it, where they are not just walking among the camp. They are in the tabernacle in a certain place eating. But each priest who gets to do a certain thing is going to keep what they did, except for the grain offering. The grain offering is going to be kept for all of the sons of Aaron, all the priests, and they're going to share that grain. Whereas with an animal, they're going to be sacrificing quite a few animals every day. So it's not like, you get to eat today and you get to eat tomorrow. There's going to be enough, but they're not sharing it. It is being kept by the person who performs the sacrifice. It is being kept by the person, the priest who is doing the sacrificing and making the atonement. They shall get to have it. And in this way, it keeps jealousy from arising, because you're not doing what is just being created by man. You're doing what is created by God. God has said, this is the way you are to do these things. This is the order of things. This is what you are going to do in service of me. This is what I have allotted for you. And with each thing, this is going to be different. With each person, it's going to be different. So you're not going to sit here and be envious of your brother who got to offer this when you're offering that. Because there will come a time when you are going to be doing something that they didn't. And now you're not going to be fighting over it, because it's all going to be for your good. The Lord will provide. And this is his word of how he's going to do it, the way in which he's going to do it, and how they are to behave and be obedient to his word when he does it. This is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which he shall offer to the Lord. If he offers it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanksgiving unleavened cakes mixed with oil, unleavened wafers anointed with oil, or cakes of blended flour mixed with oil. Besides the cakes, as his offering, he shall offer leavened bread with the sacrifice of thanksgiving of his peace offering. And from it he shall offer one cake from each offering as a heave offering to the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. So here we actually see the first instance of leavened bread being offered as well, as sacrifice of a thanksgiving offering. His peace offering is just in thanksgiving to the Lord, to thank him for all of his blessings, to bring forth a peace offering to be seen as just wanting to be and show appreciation to the Lord, to be appreciative and to show appreciation to everything that the Lord has blessed in your life. This is the thanksgiving peace offering being made. And in this case, the person can offer leavened bread if it's baked in a cake. The flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it is offered. He shall not leave any of it until morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering is a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day he offers the sacrifice. But on the next day, the remainder of it may also be eaten. The remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day must be burned with fire. And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering is eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, nor shall it be imputed to him. It shall be an abomination to him who offers it, and the person who eats it shall bear guilt. So the Lord is saying, look, when you ended up making these peace offerings, it would be split. You would burn a piece for God, the priest would keep some of the meat, and the person offering it would also keep a portion to eat. And that way it would be as if you were sharing a meal with the priest and with God. You were all sharing one meal. Now, if this is being done in a certain way, you could also eat it the next day, not just the day you made the sacrifice. But if you let it linger, because let's be honest, if you're letting cooked meat sit out, it's going to go bad. It is an abomination. And the peace offering will not be accepted if it's eaten on the third day. If it's eaten at all on that third day, then God is now no longer going to accept that peace offering. It's almost as if you didn't do it, and on top of that, you are now bearing guilt. You have now sinned before the Lord by not following the ordinance of the sacrifice as you were meant to. You have done something you weren't supposed to, and now that is being placed on you as well. So your offering was not going to be accepted, and you now bear guilt, and you now have to make a sin offering and a trespass offering in its place as well. The flesh that touches any unclean thing shall not be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. And as for the clean flesh, all who are clean may eat of it. But the person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offering that belongs to the Lord, while he is unclean, that person shall be cut off from his people. So once again, the Israelites had very strict laws on what is clean and what is unclean. And if anything was done in an unclean fashion, they were to be cut off. They were not to be in the congregation. In certain ways, this is done intentionally, means they are to be cut off, they are to be exiled. In other ways, it just means that they are to be cut off and be placed as unclean outside the camp for a specific period of time. When we go over the laws of uncleanliness, we'll see. It'll say you're unclean until evening, you are unclean for 7 days, this kind of thing. Moreover, the person who touches any unclean thing, such as human uncleanliness, or an unclean animal, or any abominable unclean thing, and who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offering that belongs to the Lord, that person shall be cut off from his people. So this is more talking about people who are coming to the Lord in an unclean fashion and not coming to him with themselves set apart for him and him alone. People who are coming forth in an unclean fashion, who are not ritually clean, who are doing things in a way they know better than to do, they're going to be cut off because you are taking a piece of this peace offering. You are sharing an improper meal with the Lord. You are sharing it in a way that is not meant to be shared. The Lord has put out certain things for you to do, and you are not doing them in the way that they should be done. And you are trespassing before the Lord in doing so. Said, Jesus warns against it. Paul warns against it in the New Testament. But the Lord originated it here in Leviticus to his people. That not just the new Christian church, we have different laws under grace than they had under the law. But cleanliness was important to keep his people separated. And the Lord would not have it any other way. His people were to be for him and him alone, based on their history and based on where they were going. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, you shall not eat any you shall not eat any fat of ox or sheep or goat, and the fat of an animal that dies naturally, and the fat of what is torn by wild beasts may be used in any other way, but you shall by no means eat it." You know, there are lots of purposes for fat. You can use it to make other things, but you were not to eat it. Any other use you could find for it, you can use, but you could not eat it. For whoever eats the fat of the animal of which men offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, the person who eats it shall be cut off from his people. Moreover, you shall not eat any blood in any of your dwellings, whether of bird or beast. Whoever eats any blood, that person shall be cut off from his people. The Lord is bringing his people out of Egypt, where they did a lot of abominable things, where they had rampant paganism, where they came from rampant immorality. And they're going into the land of Canaan, full of rampant immorality, rampant paganism. And he wants his children set apart from that. You know, being a parent gives you an insight into God that I was completely incapable of having before I had children. You know, I've had children as long as I've been a Christian. But as an unbeliever looking in at Christianity, none of this stuff made sense. Why would you have to tell anybody to avoid this stuff? Why would you have to tell people not to play with dead bodies? Why would you have to tell people not to drink blood? Why would you need to tell people not to? Well, having little kids, you start to realize that they don't know a whole lot. And you need to guide them. And little kids are very literal. You need to explain everything in detail for them to understand what it is you're trying to get across. So in this case, as I said before, and I'll probably say again many times throughout the Old Testament, especially as we go through the Torah, this nation that God is bringing out of Egypt, this nation that he is forming, this people, is essentially a baby. This nation is a newborn. It is a young child learning to crawl. And before they get in with the other nations up and running, he needs them to understand. He needs them to guide them in his ways and teach them before they get in with these wild other kids that before you can walk, you need to crawl. This is a fledgling nation. He will permit things that will not be permitted later. He will permit things that he doesn't want to give them because he understands that things need to be done in baby steps. People think that before you come to Christianity, you need to make yourself right with God before you can go and accept Christ. That is the exact opposite. You won't be able to make yourself right before God until you accept Christ. You accept Christ broken, and he makes you right. The Pharisees and the Sadducees questioned Jesus about divorce. Well, what about this divorce? And Jesus says, God never intended for a divorce. But because your fathers were so stiff-necked and sinful, God had to make them a provision, lest they fall away, basically. He had to make them a provision for a divorce because of the wickedness of your hearts. He had to allow you to do that so you could take another baby step towards him, because you were not yet fit to run in his kingdom. There will come a day when we are fit to run in that kingdom, when he returns and sets up his kingdom, and we are in the new heaven and the new earth later. We will be set to run before him. But even now, we are just a toddler, stumbling and bumbling everywhere. Even now, 4,000 years later, we are still just a toddler stumbling and bumbling over our own feet every chance we get. But this fledgling nation of Israel, they are nothing but a crawling baby looking to put anything in its mouth that it can get. And the Lord is having to explain these things to them. You need to stay away from this. You need to stay away from this. This is unhealthy for you. This is dirty. This is not for your good. Because every chance we get as a people, we are going to stuff that dirty stone in our mouth. We're going to put that hair in our mouth. We're going to pick up that 3-week-old Cheerio and try to swallow it. This is what fledgling children do. This is what this nation was going to do. And God needed to lead them through tiny crawl, tiny step by tiny step. Don't let this stuff make you think that you're better than those Israelites, because we aren't. Sadly, we are far from it, and we are reverting back to where they were, even with the grace of Christ in our lives. And don't think that God was overly permissive. He is leading a people who are going to change the world. A small nation of people who are going to be a world eternity altering people. That even to this day, in the year of our Lord 2024, people still obsess over the Jewish people. They hate them for this. They love them for that. They hate the fact they even have a country of their own. They don't deserve this. That country is unbelievably small, but the whole world has its eyes fixed on it. Because that is the people the Lord chose to show the rest of the world the filth and sin they live in. They were the people the Lord chose to bring forth the Savior of all mankind from. And the sinful, fallen, hate-filled, unrepentant, stiff-necked, demonic world hates them for it and will always hate them for it. But anyway, before I start ranting too long, that's where we're going to end for this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you again next time. But until then, be blessed.